Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever, whenever you are. My name is Adam. Welcome to this pre-sales workshop. So I'm recording this workshop around the beginning of the fiscal year. And this is the time when we typically see in revenue organizations different types of updates and modifications, changes, optimizations to the sales process. And pre-sales is really no different. Pre-sales typically will have some type of a pre-sales process, a pre-sales journey, or even rules of engagement. They maybe fall under all of those categories. But this is the time of year that if you have one of those processes, you can take a moment to just adjust it and take a look at what's working or what isn't. But if you're in an organization where maybe you have not adopted a pre-sales process, that pre-sales process can be an extremely effective tool for many, many different parts of your organization. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's workshop. So today we'll talk about what is a pre-sales process. We'll talk about some of the key inputs and outputs of that process, what it's used for, what its objectives are. And I'll live demonstrate a template that illustrates what a pre-sales process could look like for your organization to be used as either a blueprint for a new process, or you can use it maybe to ideate on some tweaks that might be useful for your pre-sales organization, your pre-sales practice. So let's go ahead and dive in. So what is a pre-sales process? Whether it's a pre-sales process, a pre-sales journey map, or even a rules of engagement, this is really just going to be the pre-sales version, solutions consulting, sales engineering analog to the sales process, whether it's a net new logo acquisition or whether it's a customer renewal, retention, or even growth initiative. It lists out the steps that align with that customer selling process of the inputs and outputs, key activities, deliverables that pre-sales owns and is responsible for in lockstep with that sales process. Now, the pre-sales process clearly helps us execute that revenue cycle much more efficiently. And so if your organization has a pre-sales process already, you probably established this as a best practice for your pre-sales organization. But if your organization doesn't, this could be an emerging best practice for your pre-sales group today. It can also be very, very useful as a way to help enable new pre-sales team members when they're coming on board, to help them understand, how do we get a customer from point A to point B? What does that selling process actually look like? When am I supposed to deliver? What am I supposed to deliver? And what are the resources there to support me in that really important revenue cycle? So let's take a deeper dive into what a pre-sales process might look like and focus on a few of those key detailed elements that could be important for your organization. So what are some of the key areas of a pre-sales process that I'd be looking for and have found effective in my career? And I think you might find these effective as well. The first area that I think we really want to ensure is in our pre-sales process is alignment with the sales process. And by alignment, I mean, we're literally architecting our pre-sales process and putting it directly next to each stage in the sales process, because that gives clear visibility into how best to support the outcomes from the sales process from a pre-sales perspective. And that ties into the second area that I'm looking for. The second area is clear activities and outcomes for each stage of the pre-sales process. Nothing is worse than trying to deal with ambiguity in pre-sales when you're managing a massive book of business and trying to understand what customer needs what, or what prospect is looking for what capability. So we want to make sure that if we're focusing on supporting our revenue cycle and revenue teams, we understand what clear outcomes we're trying to achieve at each stage. The third piece of a pre-sales process, I'd like to understand what are the meetings that are going to be available and necessary for me to support on my calendar. Managing my calendar is incredibly important to be effective as a pre-sales pro. So whether it's an internal meeting to regroup with your AE or an external meeting maybe to have with a customer, you want to understand what are those typical meetings so you can plan accordingly. Lastly, what are the resources available for me as a pre-sales pro that I'll need to take advantage of in this step of the process? Maybe it's a demonstration organization or some customer facing collateral. But what are those resources? Where are they located? And how do I access them? So those are really the 4 key areas that I would be looking for as standard best practice guidance for your pre-sales process. Now let's go ahead and jump into the whiteboard, and I'll diagram and walk through an example of a template that you could either use to modify your existing process, or you can use if you don't have a process and are looking to implement one. So let's dive in. All right, gang, let's jump into the whiteboard. Now I'm going to draw some of these out. I want to illustrate this visually and walk you through this process, build out visually. So there's a couple of key elements that I'd like to reinforce, and visually is the best way, I think, to reinforce these. So I am using my wonderful Microsoft whiteboard here. I have this app on my iPad, and I'm illustrating as I'm building this out. So this is actually a really cool, useful app. Okay, so let's build out a little matrix. And you've probably seen something like this before because, yeah, let's go one more over here. Yeah, my drawing is not perfect. I'm going to recenter this just a little bit. There we go. There we go. All right, so this is what your typical sales process is going to look like. And here we've got sales, and now we have pre-sales. All right, this illustrates the first key element that I want to look for in any sales process, or any pre-sales process, excuse me. And that is the literal physical alignment with the sales process. I know it sounds very rudimentary, and it is, but sometimes the simplest, most cleanest, straightforward things are often the best. And that physical alignment allows for the best chance of achieving strategic alignment with your sales counterparts, whether you're an individual contributor or whether you're a pre-sales leader. So what I like to see is, I like to see the sales process right up here on top, and then I like to see the pre-sales process right underneath it. So that achieves the first objective that we're looking for. Next, I want by stage to understand my goals and objectives, my outcomes, my deliverables. What do I need to produce here in pre-sales? What am I trying to deliver? Lining these up by each stage allows you to clearly articulate what it is that you need to produce that's going to help and help push and usher your seller's opportunity through the pipeline. It's also meant to serve as an opportunity to use your goals and objectives, your deliverables, to understand, hey, can we accelerate this opportunity, or are we determining and finding that we have more risk in the deal? Next is going to be meetings, both internal and external. What are the unit economics around executing this pre-sales process, executing the sales process? Understanding what types of meetings you need to engage with, whether it's an internal or an external meeting, gives you a sense of not just how to best manage your calendar, but also how to quantify the amount of effort that's going in to not just closing an opportunity, but executing on this process from one stage to the next. The last piece, resources. Resources are key to understand then who or what are the resources that I have available for me to execute this process. This is a great enablement tool. This is a great training tool, but it's also a great alignment tool because it helps you clearly understand if I have to engage, let's say InfoSec, if I have to engage legal, and that's part of my pre-sales deliverables at stage 3 or stage 2 or stage 4, whenever it is, for example, I can clearly see that and understand the net effect and impact it might have on the rest of the overall sales process. Now, that's an example of how we can use this to drive alignment. That's more of a time-based example. So if I have maybe resources here that have SLAs or that maybe are, let's say, 14 days, and maybe I have a sales process, my ops team has said, stage 3, we want to see you get a duration of 7 days. Well, there in that example, that's a big red flag, right? That's a big red flag because I am in pre-sales working with a much longer SLA, and I'm going to create some dissonance in my sales process. So this is a great way to use that as a mechanism to understand how do we Are our resources in the right place? Are our goals and objectives in the right place to line up with the sales process? Now let's get rid of that. Now the next item that I really like to see an example I wanted to show here is how do we use this potentially for other elements. And look at this. I am just using the I could try to edit that out, but I'm not going to. I'm getting crazy with the eraser button. So let's stick with the stage 3 example again. Now, one thing that doesn't show up here, but it'll show up in the template is sometimes in each of these stages, you're going to see there's going to be a forecast category here. And that forecast category is going to extend all the way through each one of these stages. Now, imagine, if you will, that an opportunity accelerates quickly here from stage 0 all the way to stage 4, stage 5. And maybe your sales team has this in the forecast category of commit. Well, if you can look back and see your goals and objectives, your resources, your inputs, your outputs, and you see, wait a minute, we're not there yet. We're still stuck at stage 3. That's a big risk point. That's a huge risk point because we're using the visual alignment with the sales process to illustrate, guys, we still have a bunch of deliverables here. So let's figure out how we get those things done. Let's figure out the impact of the opportunity. So those are just 2 examples of how I think that alignment piece can be super, super critical and be useful to help execute on your pre-sales process. Now, we've put together a template for you here. This is as generic as it comes in terms of what's, potentially a sales process. You can find these on Google, what a sales process might look like. A lot of them will have forecast categories, different sales activities, may even have exit criteria. The key here is how are we lining this up with our pre-sales process? So you can customize these rows. Maybe I've seen processes have maybe a row for demo, maybe a row for valuation to signify what type of demo are we giving at this stage. If you're in software, maybe something for a proof of value or proof of concept should slot in here as well. It's really for you to decide, but hopefully this template will get you started. So you can find the template at the link below in the comments and download it, check it out, make a copy for yourself. That's it for the whiteboard session. Let's head back into the workshop and we'll bring it home. That concludes this episode of the Pre-Sales Workshop, where we took a look at the pre-sales process, talked a little bit about what the process is, what it's used for, and did a live demonstration of a template that you could use to help architect your new pre-sales process, or even as ideas to tweak your existing process. You can find a link to the template below in the comments. Please like and subscribe to this on wherever you're watching. Shoot me a direct message or an email if you've implemented this process or have ideas on how to change it. But thanks again for spending some time with me, and we'll see you next time right here in the workshop.